Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia have withdrawn from the Ottawa Convention, which bans anti-personnel mines, commonly known as landmines. The Ottawa Treaty has been in force in Poland since 2013. Why the shift in policy by these countries? What are the implications for regional security? And what are the possible humanitarian impacts? Well, to discuss these and related questions, we are delighted to be joined by Jakub Janda. He's director of the European Values Centre for Security Policy. Welcome, Mr. Janda. Good to have you on.
Thank you very much, sir. Good to be here.
Pleasure, sir. Now, the Ottawa Convention, give us a bare bones outline of what it says with regard to landmines.
It basically says that as a country you should not and you cannot, if you are a signatory, you cannot use landmines against personnel. There is a difference to anti-tank mines, anti-heavy equipment mines, let's say. But this is specifically designed to actually safeguard security of civilians, which is very understandable if you are in a situation where there is no possible large conflict on your territory. Then obviously you do not want to use anti-personnel mines because they are horrible. Actually, after some time after they get lost, for example, in Bosnia, there might really be harmful to the civilians who might not know those mines are in the area. So that does make sense in like post-conflict areas. But if you are in a situation of Poland or the Baltic nations, who are actually actively preparing for a possible defense against a Russian ground force invasion, it makes perfect sense to actually have the ability to use landmines as a defensive tool for your country.
Understood. OK, so primarily, if I understand you correctly, it's a defensive tool, but a country needs to be careful, of course, to make sure that they're all cleared up after the conflict ends because of humanitarian implications for civilians later after the war. We have a statement by the Polish Defence Minister, Mr. Kosiniak-Kamysz, which I think should be coming up in just a second.
The reason is the direct threat, unabated attacks carried out in a hybrid way. For the time being, I hope that no others will ever happen, but that's why we must be strong and be ready for any solution. We cannot be limited in any way, because defending the homeland must be done at all costs. Of course, we too declare adherence to all humanitarian principles, but Poland cannot be bound by a corset, nor the Baltic states, which will make it impossible to protect their own interests. That is why we decide to denounce the Ottawa Convention.
OK, now something like 160 countries around the world did sign that convention, but there are some notable exceptions, aren't there? USA and Russia being two of them. China, of course, is a third. India, Pakistan are others. So why did the really big players stay out of this?
Most of the time, those big players basically do not want to tie their hands, which means that they want to keep the ability to use landmines in a large conflict, which is the reason why they actually do it. And if you look today into Ukraine, and which is being invaded by Russia, actually the landmines are an important defensive tool, either for Ukrainians defending from the Russian invasion or for the Russian invaders who are trying to hold the ground from Ukrainian counteroffensive. So just technically speaking, it is an important tool for any defensive actions. So if you are in a situation of Poland and the Baltic nations, and you are expecting that in the upcoming single couple of years, Russia might be invading by ground towards you, it makes sense to have this ability. I mean, definitely there will be considerations where exactly the fields of landmines would be used. So obviously not close to large cities of Poland, for example, so civilians might get lost without any preparations. But I'm afraid this will be the course of action, which actually does make sense to use in a very conventional way.
I understand the defensive aspect of it, but what is Poland and the Baltic states, what are they going to be doing differently, to protect civilians after the risk has abated?
I would expect that some of the touches, for example, to the Russian and Belarusian border, will be designated that they would be controlled access by civilians. This is exactly what you do if you want to protect the civilians from being harmed by military or paramilitary by countries, and basically these defensive perimeters close to the borders with your potential enemy will get fortified. And the fortification is sometimes those are wires, sometimes those are physical, like concrete fortifications in particular areas. In current time also what we do have as a possibility are something called smart landmines, which basically means they could be turned on and off during a possible conflict as well, or they might be deployed by artillery. So essentially you would have artillery being able to shoot landmines towards a couple of kilometers far away, and those landmines would automatically deploy on a particular field, for example, if you need to do this quickly or through a distance. That's also a possibility.
Understood. So there are some fail-safe protections available to countries nowadays with landmines. Now, zooming out a little bit, European Union, NATO, what kind of message is this sending to them? What is their response? And can we expect other countries to start also signing out of the Ottawa Convention?
I think the message is quite clear. The message is that actually Poland and the Baltic nations are actually preparing for a large defensive war with Russia. That's basically the message which we could clearly understand from this, also from other actions by Poland and Baltic nations, such as boosting the defense spending or enlarging the military or the reservist corps for themselves as well. So they are, I would say in a very simplified language, those countries are scared that Russia might invade soon. So they are taking these actions which are completely understandable and justified for defense of your own country. I would expect that other countries might join into this, most likely Sweden, Finland. Those are the ones who are also threatened directly by Russia, just geographically, even though it is not just about the ground invasion there's also the sea component, which also might include, for example, using mines, but actually those mines at sea, which are obviously a different category and do not really harm civilians on the ground, even though they might harm commercial shipping in the future as well.
Understood. So the Ottawa Convention doesn't only apply to anti-personnel mines, you're saying it also applies to mines in the sea, for example, so anti-ship mines, if you like.
No, what I basically mean is that this is something what I expect as defensive action. So, for example, Finland, Sweden might actually be doing this in the future. That's something what if smaller countries expect an attack by a larger enemy, such as Russia in this case, or, for example, in the case of Taiwan and Japan from China, they actually have ability to put sea mines into the sea to defend themselves either from an amphibious invasion, so something like Normandy-style landing of foreign force to your country, or, for example, to use sea mines against ports of the adversary of the enemy to make it harder for the enemy to attack through their ports. That's also a possibility, but this is usually what is done right before the war starts or at the beginning of the war, where we are fortunately not there yet, but we might unfortunately be there in a couple of years from now.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, Mr. Janda. Now, we're watching, the war, the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, and we're seeing that the tactics of war have changed, they've evolved, and the Ukrainians are coming up with effective and innovative means for waging war. And, drones, of course, come to mind. They've been extremely effective. Mines are quite an old technology, but do you still feel that they are effective in this modern day in terms of their warfare capability?
Landmines are very important for defensive measures. Also, especially if you are thinking about large forces of the enemy, which are attacking some specific ground. They do not stop the attack. They do not really eliminate the attack, but they might slow them down, for example, or they might force the enemy to attack to a direction where you want them to attack, where you are better prepared, better fortified, for example. So landmines are something like tanks, for example. Those things individually do not really win the war, but you need them in basically in a mix with other tools of defensive war, so you could actually make it harder for the enemy to attack or slow them down. So, for example, it gives you more time to bring your reinforcements, or, for example, bring your own drones or artillery, such as the Ukrainians are doing it quite well.
Okay, now it strikes me that landmines really are, I suspect, the most effective against large hordes of enemy soldiers attacking. But again, with regard to modern warfare techniques, you're seeing less and less of that. Not so much with Russia, of course, because they are still doing that. But I suspect with Ukraine and other countries, they use it. They're relying on technology more than huge volumes of soldiers. Would you agree?
Definitely. In general, there is much more technology being used, but it does not exclude actually using large mass of soldiers, of infantry, for example, as we have seen the Russians use it, or, for example, using North Korean troops for these large-scale attacks, similar to what we have seen during World War II with the Red Army, for example.
Okay, now just taking a big picture view in terms of the defence, the eastern flank of NATO, it clearly is at most threat from any possible invasion. What else can Poland and the Baltic states do to defend?
There are a couple of things which are already happening on a massive scale. One is enlarging the military itself, so number of professional soldiers. The other thing which Poland is doing quite rapidly is increasing the number of reservists, so basically civilians who get some basic training, and you could use them if you need them in a large conflict in the future. There is fortification efforts. So basically, large portions of artillery pieces, either classic artillery or, for example, missiles as well. Air defense issues, which are being a major problem if the Americans would not be available in defending Central East in Europe, and essentially tactical air force, which needs to be in place together with the drones to actually have some level of air superiority over the possible enemy, over Russia.
Understood. Mr. Janda, unfortunately, we're going to have to end our conversation here, but thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our audience. Have a good evening, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Bye-bye. And that's all from us here on TVP World. Goodbye.